Welcome to the trade deadline edition of NHL Quick Hits. David Crosby here with Steele Roden. And last episode, we discussed the Islanders dealing for Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac, along with Toronto's trade for Riley Nash. So if you haven't seen that yet, check it out after this episode. But we'll get into Toronto's other moves a little later in this episode. But for now, we have to start with the Bruins' acquisition of Taylor Hall. Boston sent Anders Bjork and a 2021 second-round pick to Buffalo for Hall and Curtis Lazar. The immediate reaction was shock. This seems like such a low price for a former MVP, and when you looked around at some of the other players who got moved to other teams for first-round picks, it looked even worse. But of course, Hall had that no trade clause, and he alluded to himself using that power a little bit, saying he wanted to go to Boston and to a team he thought could win. Of course, he also had that big salary. So, Steele, do you blame Buffalo at all for what looks like a really poor return, or just chalk this up to Hall's leverage?
It's a little bit of both. I do blame Buffalo just a little bit because the later it went on and the closer it got to the trade deadline, the less power they had in their hands. And so, dealing him, a couple of hours before the trade deadline comes to an end, you lose a lot of power there. And, the return they wanted was definitely a first-round pick, but you're not going to get that as closer and closer you get to that deadline. But again, the no trade clause in Hall, he has a lot of power and say in where he wants to go. So I think that had a lot to do with the decision of only getting a second-round pick as well as on a forward Anders Bjork in return for Hall and Curtis Lazar. So it's definitely not the trade the Buffalo Sabres were looking for, and definitely not the season the Buffalo Sabres were hoping for when they signed Taylor Hall, but you had to send him off and get some kind of return because he was only on a one-year deal at $8 million. So you had to get something in return. And Anders Bjork in a second-round pick, it's nothing too special and happy about, but you got something in return for Taylor Hall.
Well, Boston is obviously trying to strike while their current core is still in their prime. I love this move for Boston. I mean, outside of that perfection line, they've had so much trouble getting any secondary scoring. We've heard a lot about their struggles at 5-on-5 being able to score. What kind of impact do you see Hall having for the Bruins?
Yeah, I think he's going to have a decent impact. And I think hopefully, in the last 19 games remaining, he can score more than 2 goals than he's had in the first 38 with Buffalo this season. And like you said, besides that perfection line, he comes in and he's probably going to be the 4th best player. And he's going to slide in right next to David Krejci on the second line. And, obviously, Jake DeBrusk will probably slide down to the 4th, Nick Ritchie down to the 3rd. So there's going to be some shuffling moves, especially they have about 6 injuries. A couple of defense as well as their goalies on the IR and day-to-day. So they have a couple of injuries they have to worry about, a couple forwards as well. So they're going to have to do a lot of shuffling. And I think he'll come in and, probably end up on the second power play unit, maybe get some first power play units just to see what they can do and, the chemistry they can kind of get going before they kind of secure that 4th spot heading into the playoffs. So I think he's going to make a decent impact and hopefully he gets a lot more goals than he did with Buffalo.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. I think he's going to do great there, but he's already talking about hopefully staying in Boston long term. So he's going to not have too much time to prove his value, but we'll see if they can make a deep playoff run. Let's go over to the Leafs, who are one of the busiest teams in the trade market, first swinging a 3-team trade with Columbus and San Jose for Nick Foligno at 25% of his salary, and Stefan Nason sending a 4th rounder in 2021 to the Sharks, and to Columbus, a 2021 first and a 2022 4th rounder. Now, Toronto made some other moves, which we'll get to shortly, but do Foligno and Nason address their needs at forward?
Absolutely. This is a huge move for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and not to say that they didn't have enough before, but the thing that really sticks out to me in this trade is the leadership quality they're going to get from Nick Foligno. So now you have 4 past captains for NHL teams: Nick Foligno, Joe Thornton, John Tavares. I'm missing the last one right now, but they have 4 previous captains for different teams in the NHL. So they have a lot of leadership and high power quality up front on the forward end. And Nick Foligno just keeps adding to that with Steven Nason as well. So I think Nick Foligno can add in really well into the center position, which will probably be the 3rd line, just because you have Austin Matthews and John Tavares, obviously. So they have a lot of power up front, and adding Nick Foligno again just adds a lot more grit and some physicality that they really do need. It would have been nice to maybe address a little bit on the defensive end, but I think Nick Foligno can add that up front, helping out in the back end. So this is a great move for the Toronto Maple Leafs and makes them really one of the front contenders to win the Stanley Cup this year.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I love the leadership and experience Foligno brings. He's really a perfect fit as a defensively sound player there, who can basically play on any line. So whether Toronto has some injuries, they need to do some shuffling around, which Sheldon Keefe is known to do. I think this is a great fit. And of course, that fourth captain, Jason Spezza, is having a great season so far as well. Now, later Sunday night, Toronto sent a third rounder in 2022 to Calgary for backup goalie David Rittich. What does this say about Frederik Andersen to you, and how do you like this deal?
It doesn't really say too much about Frederik Andersen, but I do love this deal, and I think it's just trying to be responsible and having as much depth as you can in the crease going into the playoffs. Because you and I saw this last year with the Colorado Avalanche. Philip Grubauer goes down with a leg injury. Pavel Francouz comes in, and he gets the exact same injury that Philip Grubauer did. You're talking about your top two goalies going down to injury and you having to rely on Michael Hutchinson in net. And now the Leafs have Michael Hutchinson. I don't think that's a great deal to go with. So you're getting some relief, you're getting some responsibility and some backup quality that you can rely on just in case they go down to injury. And we've seen the struggle both Frederik Andersen and Jack Campbell have had this year. Obviously, we know how Jack Campbell's played exceptionally well. 11-0 in the 11 games he's played so far, but he has gone down to injury. Frederik Andersen's been out for 2 weeks now, maybe a little bit more. So I think it's just about being responsible and having enough depth and backup as much as possible. So I really do like the deal and getting a guy like David Rittich.
Well, Toronto also further addressed their depth, especially on the back end, sending the Ducks a 2022 fifth-round pick for defenseman Ben Hutton, who's an insurance policy for the 6th or 7th spot if they face any injuries there on their back end. But aside from the deals that we just covered, what was your favorite deal or an underrated move you really like?
There's a couple. So I'll start off with Jeff Carter going to the Penguins for a 2022 third-round pick and a 2023 fourth-round pick. I think that's a pretty good deal for the Penguins and for the LA Kings. So for the Penguins, this does really help them in trying to secure second or third spot in their division. And I think, with him being able to play the center or on the left wing position, it really does add a lot of depth and availability just in case there are some injuries in their case. So I think adding a guy like Jeff Carter, who still has a lot of skill left and, fill out their bottom six forwards is really good for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then again, I'm going to go over to the Montreal Canadiens acquiring Eric Gustafsson for a 7th round pick. I think, like we talked about this before, this kind of rounds out their bottom forward fencing pair. And can really help them in front of the net and in the defensive zone. So I think those two trades right there were some of the ones that really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I love those moves as well. And this one came in really late. We were talking about it before the show, but the Capitals getting Anthony Mantha and the Red Wings getting a huge haul, a first, a second, Jacob Vrana and Richard Panik back in return. That's just Stevie Yzerman doing Stevie Y things. I mean, talk about rebuilding. This guy gets it right every single time. Honestly, I think Vrana alone is almost as good as Mantha. We disagreed on that a little bit. You think Mantha has a bit of a higher ceiling and can be more of an impact guy for Washington, but I absolutely love that deal for Detroit. That's going to do it, though, for today's trade deadline episode. On behalf of Steel Roden, I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.